Catherine of Valois was born on October 27th, 1401, a child of a king and queen who would become the central figure in one of the most exciting and revolutionary periods in European history. Her father was Charles VI of France, and her life was never meant to be uncomplicated. Chaos followed her from the instant she entered the world. What if a king and queen have a child born into a kingdom troubled by revolution and turmoil? Her father, Charles VI, was a king in title, but frequently powerless in fact. Torn apart by extreme mental illness, he would spend years at a time wandering between sanity and madness, leaving France divided and weak. This perpetual political turmoil defined Catherine's early life and would go on to characterize much of her own. By the age of 19, Catherine was caught up in the eye of a political maelstrom. In 1420, she wed Henry V of England in a strategic marriage brokered by the Treaty of Troyes. This wasn't a romance, it was a war negotiation. The motive? To merge two competing kingdoms in the midst of the gory 100 Years' War. For Henry V, one of England's greatest kings, to marry Catherine wasn't merely political, it was strategic. He had his sights on the French throne, and Catherine was his ace. But destiny had other plans. Just 2 years into the marriage, Henry V succumbed to an unexpected death, making Catherine a widow at the age of 21. She was left with a baby son, Henry VI, who would go on to become the English king. Alas, all alone in a foreign country, without the security of her mighty husband, Catherine was left defenseless again. What does a queen do when her royal guard just disappears overnight? It was then that Catherine shocked Europe by making a choice. She fell for a man well below her rank, Owen Tudor, a Welsh courtier who used to work in the household of her recently deceased husband. Their affair was brazen. Some might even call it reckless. As a widowed queen, Catherine was meant to stay unwed, but she chose to ignore royal tradition and marry Owen in secret. Their marriage wasn't just taboo, it was revolutionary. Out of this illicit love, the Tudor dynasty was born. Their sons Edmund and Jasper Tudor would become the forebears of a royal house that would dominate England for over a century, including notorious Henry VIII. Few might have imagined that the peaceful affair between an ex-queen and a humble courtier would change the face of British history once and forever. But was Catherine ever actually celebrated for her part in this royal heritage? Even though she held her critical role in the founding of the Tudor dynasty, Catherine's memory was mostly overlooked or intentionally erased. Her life, which was tainted with political intrigue and personal scandal, became more of a footnote in history than a revered legacy. Even her death was shrouded in mystery. What actually occurred to the queen who assisted in creating a dynasty? Catherine died young, on January 3rd, 1437, at the age of 35. It's not known for certain what killed her. Some think it was complications from giving birth. Others think that she had a lingering illness that eventually took her life. Whatever the reason, her death was treated with the ceremonial respect due a former queen. She was embalmed, wrapped in cloth, and encased in lead. Her organs were removed and entombed separately along her funeral procession, though no one is quite sure where. But the mystery didn't end there. Though her funeral featured a detailed wooden effigy, painted and clothed in her likeness, and still standing in Westminster Abbey today. Her body itself was lost for centuries. Somehow, her remains were left unburied, hidden, and forgotten for over 400 years. It wasn't until the 20th century that her final resting place was rediscovered, prompting historians to revisit the powerful yet overlooked legacy she left behind. So why was a woman who birthed a royal dynasty almost wiped out of history? Catherine of Valois was more than a treaty bride or a queen, torn between warring kingdoms. Her life was a testament to the danger and nuance of royal politics in medieval Europe. She was born into the madness of the French court, married off as a pawn in a struggle for continental power, widowed too early, and then shunned for preferring love to duty. Her life was far from ordinary, and yet the dynasty she contributed to would rule England for centuries. Her union with Owen Tudor, which was a scandal whispered in corridors, provided the basis for a new royal dynasty. But whereas her line, particularly the mighty Tudors, would become famous and glorious, Catherine's name was seldom heard. Her life, which was a dynamic mix of passion, courage, and self-sacrifice, was relegated to the background, smothered by the politics of her day. Until now. Now, as her effigy quietly guards Westminster Abbey, Catherine's tale is being told at last. Her life teaches us that occasionally the individuals who best alter the world are precisely those upon whom history works hardest to enshroud with obscurity. The disorder into which Catherine was born didn't only form her childhood, but shaped her entire understanding of duty, survival, and power. Raised beneath the specter of falling empires, she learned early on that being a royal woman was about balancing obedience and strategy. Only 19, Catherine of Valois was wed to one of England's strongest rulers, Henry V, the War King. Their marriage, arranged by the Treaty of Troy, was not a romantic fairy tale. It was a strategic alliance designed to bring peace between France and England and give Henry the French throne when Catherine's father, Charles X, died. But what is the situation when peace is created by means of force, and love is never at the table? This union was not one of love. Catherine was a token, a marriage bridge between two opposing countries. She was not a companion to Henry V, but a guarantee. Her purpose was defined: give him an heir and help secure England's hold on France, and this she did. Their son, Henry VI, was born, a boy who was to inherit both England and France. But fate has the capability to go against even the best-laid schemes. Only 2 years into their marriage, Henry V died of sudden dysentery. Catherine, 21 and now a widow, was left with an infant son and no actual political authority. She had royal lineage, but no throne, a nominal queen. In the English court's opinion, she was a liability, useful only as a mother to the future king. But Catherine would not be satisfied to remain the pawn forever. It was at this vulnerable time that she made a move that would surprise and outrage the English elite. She remarried, and to another king or nobleman, no, but to Owen Tudor, a humble Welsh courtier and her personal servant. Why would a former queen violate every convention and marry a man of lower rank? This was no strategic marriage. This was love. Owen was younger than Catherine by a great many years, and their marriage disobeyed every courtly convention. It was a union created in secret, passion, and unspoken defiance. And out of it was born something special. Their sons, Edmund and Jasper Tudor, would go on to play important roles in the future of England. Their descendants would create a dynasty that would dominate the country for more than a century. Yes, from this unlikely affair was born the great Tudor family, including the iconic King Henry VIII. And yet, history almost forgot the woman who made it all happen. Though she played a pivotal role in determining England's destiny, Catherine's second marriage granted her no tranquility. Her love was the subject of gossip at court. She was accused of betraying royal propriety. Owen's intentions were suspect, and their children, although vital to England's prosperity, were born under a cloud of controversy. Catherine's life was even left unresolved at death. She died in 1437 at the age of 35. Royalty or not, her funeral was subdued, spooky. No procession, no weeping in the streets. Her funeral was in accordance with royal custom: embalming, linen wrapping, lead encasing, and separate disposal of her organs to be buried along the way. But for some reason, that's been lost to history. Her grave went unmarked. What type of queen is interred without a name? Her resting place was concealed for over 400 years under Westminster's dust and stone. It wasn't until 1929 that she was found. Yet it was not merely the finding of remains. It was the beginning of an overdue recognition. Catherine of Valois had been dwelling in plain sight. Shadows cast by the kings she gave birth to and the dynasty she founded, her life had been interred, literally and figuratively. Her rediscovery in the 20th century reawakened interest in the woman behind the Tudors, in the queen who broke the mold and influenced history from the shadows. But why was her story so easily forgotten? Perhaps it was because she wasn't the kind of queen history wanted to remember: young, widowed, and scandalously remarried. Perhaps it was because her greatest accomplishment wasn't in her own reign, but because she gave her children power and heritage. She was the roots of the Tudor tree, but not its most prominent branch. However, her rediscovery serves as a reminder that forgotten queens still have something to say. To see where Catherine fits into history, we need to grasp the world she was living in. During her life, there was the 100 Years' War, a war of over a century in length, where England and France were fighting a bitter war over control. The war was not just a war of soldiers, it was a war of identity, legitimacy, and royal lineage. Catherine's union with Henry V was all part of this game of high-stakes politics. The Treaty of Troyes, signed in 1420, declared Henry heir to the throne of France, a move that outraged most French nobles. For Catherine, the treaty cemented her status as a political nexus between two warring lands. But what if the bridge collapses? When Henry V passed away, everything was turned upside down. Catherine's son, Henry VI, was a baby king, and she was Queen Dowager, powerful in title, powerless in reality. Her authority was curtailed, and everything she did was watched. But rather than stepping into the background, Catherine made a step that would turn all this around. Her marriage to Owen Tudor was the starting point of the construction of the Tudor dynasty. It's easy to focus on the famous Tudors, Henry VIII, Elizabeth I, but they only are there because of the woman who cared more about love than legacy, and about scandal rather than submission. Catherine's strength, quietly as it was, her refusal to be managed, and her courage in the face of political disapproval are what really set the course of England. Now, looking back on her life, we are reminded that history has a habit of hiding its greatest players. Catherine of Valois was never fated to be a queen remembered, but now, centuries later, we can finally look at her clearly, not as a pawn, not as a scandal, but as the mother of a dynasty and the humble architect of England's future. Although Catherine of Valois did not exercise official authority after Henry V died, she was nonetheless quietly influential, because she was the mother of the future king Henry VI. But it was not her family that would seal the fate of England by itself. Her own life would be turned upside down when she went against convention for love and silence for scandal. Come Owen Tudor, a Welsh courtier, once a servant, now her clandestine husband. The notion that a former queen would wed a man of such lowly standing was unimaginable to the English court, and yet Catherine did. Their union, born of unassuming love and mutual fortitude, was not a flight of romance. It was an act of individual will. In an era when women were frequently pawns, Catherine made her move. How frequently would a servant be the ancestor of kings? Owen's rise from servant to royal spouse was nothing short of miraculous, and their union, scandalous though it was, set the stage for a dynasty to come. Their sons, Edmund and Jasper Tudor, would be at the heart of the Wars of the Roses. Edmund's son, Henry Tudor, would later battle and defeat Richard III and ascend to the throne as Henry VII, founding the Tudor dynasty that ruled for nearly 150 years. Monarchs like Henry VIII and Elizabeth I would remake the world. None of it would have been possible, though, without the woman whose silent rebellion began it all. But for all her historical fame, Catherine's name had been tarnished by scandal and disapproval. Her second marriage was scandalous to most at the English court. A queen, after all, was supposed to be chaste and loyal to her royal station, even in widowhood. But Catherine's choice to marry again was not one of lust. It was a testament to her own independence in an era where women had very little. Nevertheless, history punished her for it. When Catherine died in 1437, there was no state funeral, no somber procession, no grand tomb inscribed in her memory. Though she had belonged to the most powerful dynasty in English history, her death went unnoticed, even unremembered. Her grave was not marked, and down the centuries was lost for good. How could a queen, mother of a dynasty, be forgotten? Her gravesite was lost to the centuries. Historians looked, archaeologists speculated, and no one actually knew where she lay buried. Her life, like her gravesite, was buried under the weight of more significant names: kings, conquerors, male successors. Her achievements were silently erased, relegated to footnotes to the lives of men who succeeded her. Then, about 500 years afterward, something amazing occurred. In 1929, Catherine of Valois' grave was discovered by Westminster Abbey workmen. She was buried out of sight, yet they found her. It was an unadorned grave, nothing at all like the lavish memorials of her royal kin, but it was sufficient to enable a rediscovery not only of her bones, but of her tale. The forgotten queen was no longer lost. The unnamed grave represented how quickly women's place in history is forgotten. Catherine had provided England with its most legendary royal dynasty, but she had never been buried with the dignity that was hers, her own legacy muffled by scandal and royal intrigue. But now, at last, it was being told. And what a story it is! Her union with Henry V was one of diplomacy, but her union with Owen Tudor was one of defiance. It was from this union that the Tudor kings were born, who would rule England with unprecedented power. Catherine did not wed into history, she created it. And yet, for centuries, her name hardly appeared in the textbooks. Catherine's rediscovery wasn't just a burst of historical moment. It was a turning point in the way we view the past. It challenged historians to rethink the early Tudor period and acknowledge the women who contributed to it. Her tombstone, topped with only a humble plaque, is now a strong reminder that history so frequently overlooks the women who contribute to it. She was a survivor, a tactician, and a mother, more than a queen. While England went through civil wars, successive monarchs, and wholesale religious reformation, the memory of Catherine of Valois had been embedded in the crown itself, though the name had been forgotten. Her newly discovered tomb is now not only her final resting place, but also a testament to the failure of history and its chance to get it right. Because Catherine of Valois did not simply change history through her bloodline, she changed it by refusing to be silent. The excavation of Catherine of Valois' grave was more than an archaeological find. It was a retrieval of a lost queen's heritage. Her tale had lain hidden for centuries under the patriarchal heritage, lost to the strong men who succeeded her. But now she was once again in the limelight, challenging historians and the general public to reconsider the woman behind the Tudor monarchy. Catherine lived through one of the most volatile times in European history. The 100 Years' War had set England and France in perpetual turmoil, and Catherine's life was influenced by the repercussions of power vacillations, tenuous alliances, and royal battles. Her first marriage to Henry V was the very result of that turmoil, a diplomatic move to combine two kingdoms into one crown. She was meant to be the dutiful queen, but what she turned into was much more powerful. Her union with Henry was political. Her time with him, brief, guaranteed a future king, Henry VI. But when Henry V suddenly died, Catherine was young, a widow, and politically alone. The English court attempted to control her, considering her to be an instrument of power over the young heir. But in the secret chambers of that court, Catherine made a decision that would forever alter her course. She married for love and for herself. Her second marriage, to Owen Tudor, was no marriage to a noble. He was a Welsh servant, a man with no title, no considerable wealth, and no political influence. Yet Catherine married him, not in duty, but in freedom. Theirs was a stammering rebellion against all she was supposed to do. And out of that rebellion emerged a line that would rock England's throne for centuries. Edmund and Jasper Tudor, Catherine and Owen's children, would help bring the Wars of the Roses to their conclusion. And out of Edmund's descendants was born Henry VII, the first Tudor king, a dynasty that would remake the English monarchy in the persons of Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. But for centuries, Catherine's part in all this was largely forgotten. Her name was not included in her descendants' victories. Her grave remained unmarked, and her own place in history was relegated to the back in favor of noisier, more conventionally heroic tales. While her children redirected the course of history, Catherine remained, if at all, a scandal, a footnote in another's reign. But history does not forget for long. In 1929, when her tomb at last was discovered in Westminster Abbey, the world was compelled to face a lingering exclusion. Why had the mother of the Tudor dynasty, the woman at the very heart of the making of modern England, been forgotten by time? The discovery of her body caused more than merely historical interest. It caused the rethinking of how we narrate the lives of royal women. Her tomb, covered in only a humble plaque, was a stark contrast to the memorials of her illustrious successors. But maybe that minimalism now means something more, as an emblem for how many powerful women have been erased by history's prejudices. Catherine's life wasn't significant, it was defining. She walked the political minefield of medieval Europe with understated strength. She survived the demands of arranged marriages, court rumors, and royal pressure. And yet she still forged her own way. Her passion for Owen Tudor, once considered scandalous, was actually revolutionary. It challenged the notion that a queen would be worthwhile only through noble heritage or political expediency. In doing so, Catherine laid the foundation for one of the most powerful dynasties in European history. Her rediscovery in the 20th century was more than a historical rectification. It became an emblem of the necessity to recognize the forgotten authors of power. Women such as Catherine weren't ornaments of royal courts, passive observers. They were political actors, mothers of kings, and agents of history. And their narratives are as important as those who wore the crown. Nowadays, historians are finally giving Catherine the recognition she deserved all along. She's no longer merely the French princess Henry V wed. She's no longer merely the scandalous queen who wed below her station. She is the mother of the Tudor dynasty, the woman who gave birth to a royal house, and the queen who refused to be bound by convention. Catherine of Valois didn't just see history unfold, she wrote it. And though it was centuries before her voice was finally heard, her legacy today resounds through the ages as a testament to the fact that even in silence, women like Catherine have the power to imprint their mark upon the course of nations. The tomb's rediscovery of Catherine of Valois was not simply an intellectual surprise. It was the overdue vindication. It uncovered in the light of day a woman whose tale had literally been buried and historically covered up for more than 400 years. She had been removed from the pages of history, her name eclipsed by the very dynasty she aided in ushering into power. No longer. Her last resting place, revealed at Westminster Abbey in the 20th century, represented more than the homecoming of a long-forgotten queen. It represented the unspoken strength of thousands of women who have lived and served and contributed from the edges, whose stories are erased, whose lives were written out of the epic story. Catherine's life was not merely living her marriage to Henry V or being the mother of a future king. It was about surviving a world that was not constructed for her success, and yet creating a legacy more powerful than anyone could ever have conceived of. Her marriage with Owen Tudor, once written off as scandalous, now constitutes a turning point in English history. It was precisely that relationship which set the stage for the ascendance of the Tudor dynasty, a royal family that would reshape the destiny of Europe. But Catherine's story is more than royal heritage and politically arranged marriages. It is the story of defiance. She resisted the role that had been given to her. She resisted the expectations of the court. She resisted a world in which women should be silent symbols of power. By marrying Owen Tudor, a man of low birth, Catherine wasn't merely being swept up by a romantic passion, she was taking a calculated political risk. She preferred love over loyalty, and by doing so, bore a dynasty that would go on to create towering figures like Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. But though she was the fulcrum, Catherine was nearly forgotten. Her existence was boiled down to rumor in the tales of her day. Her name mentioned but fleetingly in the grand halls where her family wielded power. Centuries passed, and her grave was lost, her name forgotten. Until then, the rediscovery of her remains was not simply a rewriting of history. It was a reminder that we must remember the women who've been creating history behind the scenes all these years. It was a reminder that there are stories to be recalled behind every dynasty, behind every king, queen, and crown. Catherine's resting place, forgotten by history, is now a testament not only to her, but to all the women who have been erased from history's center stage. Catherine of Valois was more than a queen consort. She was more than the mother of a king. She was the builder of a legacy. Her life reflects the deeper currents of her era: the 100 Years' War, the fragile peace agreements, the desperate marriages used to bind alliances. She lived at the crossroads of order and anarchy. Her choices, coerced and freely made, caused waves throughout the centuries. And finally, Catherine's influence stretched far beyond her own era. It was under the Tudors that England's golden age was achieved. The Reformation, the rise of sea power, the flowering of art and letters, none would have been possible without the dynasty she helped create. Henry VIII and Elizabeth I are remembered in palaces and portraits, but Catherine's contribution was all but forgotten. But history is changing. Now, historians and authors are filling in the blanks of her life, and she's finally getting the attention she deserves. Catherine of Valois is no longer the supporting player. She is the cornerstone. Her freshly rediscovered tomb isn't merely a place of rest. It's a site of origin for a new chapter of remembrance. Her life is a reminder that history isn't about conquerors and kings. It's about queens who were brave enough to make their own decisions. Looking back at the legacy of Catherine, we are reminded that the most powerful histories are the ones that have been lost to the years, the ones not yet remembered. Catherine of Valois rested in the ground for 4 centuries, and yet her legacy lives on in her children, in the dynasty she bore, in the choices she made when the world provided her with none. She may have been forgotten in the past, but now she will never be forgotten anymore.